just going to do a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You can ask questions in the chat. We will be answering them throughout, and we will also answer questions at the end. We'll also be sharing information during the presentation in the chat, so be on the lookout for that. When we're done, you're going to be emailed a recording of this presentation, so if you have to step away for a little bit and come back, don't worry, you won't miss anything. And if there's any questions you want to ask privately, you can reach out to me, to Rashidah, or to Farah, who is running the presentation for us afterwards. We're happy to answer any questions you don't want to ask publicly. So we'll just get started. I am not Victoria Alexander, who's on your screen. Victoria is traveling today. I'm Tina Fallon, and I have worked for Victoria for 15 of the 16 years that Realty Collective has been in existence. Victoria founded Realty Collective to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate in New York, and that is why I'm really happy to work for her and for no one else. We really want you to, we look at these kinds of transactions in a holistic way. We don't just look at the sale itself, and we don't really consider ourselves primarily salespeople. We're there to coach you, to train you, and to be your therapist and your guide as you go through the emotional roller coaster that is selling a home. So yes, there's a transaction at the core of that experience, but really we want to be with you through this entire tumultuous transformation in your life. So after the presentation, we're going to send you our home sellers handbook and make sure that we have your preferred email address. If you haven't already given it to us, you can message that to us privately. We'll make sure you have it. And now I'm going to throw it over to Rashidah Siddiqui, who is our partner in this enterprise.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Our spring weather in winter time, hopefully everyone enjoyed it a little bit today. My name is Rashidah Siddiqui. I am a partner at Serpico and Siddiqui PC. I have been practicing for a little bit over 19 years, and I actually represented Victoria when she purchased her first property, and I've worked with Tina for many, many years as part of those, out of those 19 years, like I think probably 17 of those as well. I represent a lot of sellers and want to make sure that the main thing that we hopefully get out of this is preparation as well, to what you should be planning for as a seller and things you need to start putting together as you think of putting your property on the market and getting the individuals together to hopefully sell the property. I look forward to having a great panel discussion this afternoon.
Great. So the first thing we want to talk about is why sell now. Obviously, you're here because you're considering selling for one reason or another. And there are many, many reasons to sell right now. One might be you're interested in trading up to a larger space or from an apartment to a house. Or you know that your apartment or your home is in a high demand category. So you have something with outdoor space, you have parking, you have all the bells and whistles that buyers are looking for right now. You're in a really coveted neighborhood and you feel like this is an opportune moment, or you're ready to move out of New York City altogether. I also want to throw in sometimes you're considering downsizing as well, not just moving to a bigger space. There are a lot of reasons you would choose to sell right now. We are right now in a seller's market. Just even in these Zoom panels that we do one for buying in Brooklyn and one for selling in Brooklyn. And we have 10 buyers for every one seller that we have participating in these programs. Inventory is really tight right now, and there are certain kinds of properties that are incredibly hot. And you could do very well putting your home on the market right now. So if you're really thinking about selling, it's a great moment to do that. But we have a lot of considerations, and the next slides are things to think about if you are really considering selling now. So one is that the market has changed a lot in the past few months. So we had this COVID, first we had a kind of COVID cool down where people were leaving the city. And then we've had people returning as we've had vaccines have increased, and people are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable about staying in New York. We see this all the time. There's some kind of a crisis, some people leave, and then there's this rush back to the city. The very low inventory. So we are at kind of historic lows in terms of available property, a lot of buyers for every property that's on the market. Interest rates are going to be going up soon. So the Fed has indicated that they are going to be raising rates, and the mortgage market has already responded to that by increasing rates. We are still at incredibly low interest rates, historically speaking, but buyers have a sense of urgency, the kind of musical chairs, I need to get into a mortgage before rates go up. So whether or not that's really true, it's definitely something that I think Rashidah and I were just talking about. It's something we're seeing, that sense of urgency on the part of buyers. And before we went into COVID, we were actually in a little bit of a downturn. The market tends to correct over time. And so prices had leveled off, and demand was not really that high, even in 2019. So some of what we're seeing right now is also this cyclical increase in demand that you can just expect from any kind of a market. And then the other big consideration that we can all talk about is do you have enough equity invested in your home that you can sell now and get your money back out? So we call this the break-even horizon, and for many buyers, that break-even horizon is around 5 years of home ownership. And Rashidah can speak about this. It's a lot of that has to do with the high opportunity costs for buying and selling a home. So Rashidah, can you talk a little bit more about like closing costs?
Definitely. So one of the things that as you start thinking about putting your property on the market, you want to think about closing costs. In New York, you have transfer taxes, you have real estate commission, you have, if you're a co-op, you may have a flip tax, you may have co-op or condo fees. So the big thing to consideration, obviously, is the transfer taxes. In New York, it can be, if it's under 500,000, it's roughly 1.425%. So let's say nearly 1.5%. And if it's above 500,000, now you get into the 1.825%, so nearly 2%. So right there, 2% or 1.5% of whatever you're going to sell it at is going straight to New York City and New York State. So you have to take that into consideration. Also, real estate commission. Then you also have, if you're paying off of your mortgage as well. And potentially, if this is no longer your primary residence, you may have capital gains tax. So these are all considerations that you have to take into consideration. You have to think about as you put your property on the market. But the main ones, just off the bat, is your New York City, New York State transfer tax, real estate commission, legal fee, paying off your mortgage, and then obviously if it's a co-op, flip tax, any co-op fees. If it's a condo, any condo fees as well associated with that.
Right. So I know we're sort of making it sound not that attractive to sell a home, but the market that we're in is so good right now that for most sellers, that additional sort of 7 to 8% in closing costs is really offset by your profit. So if those numbers make sense to you, it's a good time for you to be selling. So let's take a look at what people are looking for and see how your property aligns with that. So one of the things we've found lately is, you've heard all the stories about supply chain issues. It's been really hard for people to find contractors. So if you have a home that already has the desirable amenities that buyers are looking for, that really sets you ahead of the pack right now. If you're in a location that people are looking for, so proximity to the park became very important to people during the pandemic. More important to people than even what used to drive things, proximity to rapid transit, for example. People were willing to go further away from a subway stop to get closer to a park. So those are little things that we've seen shift in the past couple of years. We also have so many more people working from home. So people, even people who don't need more bedrooms, need an additional space to work from home. And outdoor space became really, really important to people during the pandemic, especially when they were locked down and they couldn't go out to public places. Having their own private outdoor space or shared outdoor space made a big difference. We're always going to find people looking for school districts in New York. We can't advise people about school districts as part of our sale process, but they will be doing that research themselves. So if you're in what is considered a desirable school district, you'll definitely see buyers who are coming for the school. And then some of the things that people are looking for right now, I would say there were times when people were really looking for multifamily homes so that they could offset the cost of ownership with a rental income. There's less demand for that now. And I find that right now, single family homes are kind of outperforming multifamily homes in most markets, in part because people want more space for themselves. And there are buyers that have a lot of money right now. I can't think of any other way to say it, but there are buyers who can afford to keep the whole home for themselves. And so they would rather buy a single family home than convert a multifamily to a single family use. So if you only have a single family home, it's no longer a liability. It's a good thing. And then if you have parking, that's like the golden unicorn item. If you have parking, I don't care where your house is. If you have parking, you're definitely going to be able to attract a lot of buyers right now.
I think parking is just the number one. Like, is there parking available?
Yeah, and if you live in a neighborhood where parking is reasonably easy,
Yes.
or even if you're near a parking garage, those things, I would say a lot more people, since the pandemic, many more people have cars. Cars are part of their lives in a way that they weren't necessarily beforehand. And then I'm going to throw this one to you, Rashidah.
Yes.
Have
so
you
I
had
see
a property
we kind of talked about it a little bit, about the closing costs when you're thinking about selling. So the first one we have on there is 1031 considerations. We can do a whole 1 hour presentation just talking about what 1031 considerations are. And just to kind of break it down for you guys, I mentioned that you have to start thinking about capital gains, which means that if you purchased it, the federal government wants a chunk of your money. That's something that we're not going to avoid. Hopefully try to avoid as much as possible. But if it was your primary residence, then you have this exemption because they figured this was your primary, you lived there for 2 out of the last 5 years, it wasn't an investment property, so you get this exemption. However, depending on how long you lived there, if it's a multifamily or if it was a condo and you decided to rent it out or sublease it, now it kind of converts over to an investment property. And to save on some of these taxes that you may have to pay for capital gains, there's a thing called what we call 1031 exchanges. And that's really primarily for investment property or for a primary that you converted for investment property. So as I said, we can talk a lot about this, but it is a consideration as you start running your numbers, because maybe you owned it for 15 years and now you're part of it, you did sublease it and you got some rental income. You can try to work it out so you're saving some of this on your when you have to eventually pay the IRS their portion of it at some point. Obviously, the main things as a seller, your closing costs, as we talked about, the transfer taxes. New York City is 1% or 1.425%. New York State is a flat 0.4% no matter what the price is. So you always want to think about that 1.425% or 1.825% of just transfer taxes going to New York City and New York State. And clients that are selling like, what? I have to pay New York City and New York State to sell my property? Yes, they take their chunk out when you're buying and they take their chunk out when you're selling. So that's probably one of the main ones. And then you have flip taxes if you're buying a co-op. Some co-ops are, they take a percentage of your profit as well. And it can be based on the purchase price. It can be on your gross, but it can be based on the number of shares you own. So you always, as you start thinking about it, especially you live in a co-op, you want to speak with your management company and find out, is there a flip tax for your particular building? So you can take that into account when you're trying to figure out what your costs are going to be. Of course, if you have a mortgage, you have to pay that off. So whether it's a co-op or condo or a house, the bank wants to get their money back now that you're selling. And hopefully you have lots of equity in there. So even though you're paying them off, you're going to still be getting a profit. Then you have your Realtor Commission for the lovely work that Tina and Realty Collective and they're doing. and they get their commission. And then capital gains is really after you close, and that's for when you're doing your taxes. So always I tell clients, speak with an accountant as well. So that's, you're speaking with your realtor, you're speaking with your real estate attorney, but you should always speak with an accountant as well, because yes, after you sell, now the IRS is looking for their chunk of the money, and hopefully you can figure out ways to try and minimize that as well. And then there's other miscellaneous fees. My legal fee, even though I put it under miscellaneous, you have your legal fee. You have potential for if you have a house or a condo, you're going to have what we call title closer fees. They're the ones taking your mortgage to send it out for getting dissatisfied. So there's like smaller fees along that line. If you're paying off any real estate taxes, if you have any arrears that you have to pay off for like water, those type of things, you want to always take those into consideration as well.
I do want to just take as a quick sidebar talking about realtor commissions. So realtor commissions can be probably at minimum 3 and at maximum 6% of the sale price. So that's a lot of money to pay to someone to sell your home. And those are really divided between your the person who's representing you as a seller and the broker who's representing the buyer. If you live in a co-op building, for example, and you know that there's the people next door are looking to expand their apartment, and you could just sell directly to that person. If they're willing to offer you, let's say 95% of the market value of the home, it might be worth it to you to avoid going through the process of staging, marketing, and having open houses in your home. If there's somebody who's a buyer already in your building, then even as a real estate agent, I always recommend exhausting those avenues before you turn to a real estate agent. We will get you a higher number. And I always say, like, I'm going to price my own fee into your sale price, but sometimes it's simply easier and faster to sell to somebody who's the bird in the hand. You do absolutely need a real estate attorney when you go through that process, but you may not need. The one person you might be able to avoid is a real estate agent. Sorry, I'm talking myself out of a job, but I just think it's really important to be clear about that.
But that's good, exactly. You're looking out for the potential person that's selling, so that's always good to give them.
We also do sometimes talk people out of selling their homes altogether. Like we're very happy to keep people in their homes if they're going to be happy to stay there. So, well, and then let's see if you have a plan for after you sell. I was just talking to a seller yesterday who is selling his family the home that he grew up in. That is part of his estate sale. So he and his brother inherited the home, and they're looking to sell it. And I said to him, what kind of an experience do you want to have selling it? Because we can start with that and actually kind of build a sales system to support the outcome that you're looking for. So some people simply, like, my house is full of stuff that my parents left here. I live in another state, and I don't want to, I can't even fly back there to take a look at it. I want someone to take care of everything for me, and I don't want to have to lift a finger. That's an option. You can choose to do that. Or you can say, I just want to do an as-is sale. I don't want to do any work on my home. That's an option as well. So you can actually start from what you want, and we can build a system to support that. So don't feel like these are simply like we're giving rules and everybody has to adhere to them. There's certain things like you can't avoid the IRS, but you can choose what kind of a sale process that you want to go through. And the best place to start with that is, what do you plan to do after you sell? So do you know where you plan to go? What's your timeline? And what's your bottom line? Is there a number that you feel like, if we can sell, if we sell for this amount of money, that's the very lowest that we can afford to go? Those are really important, frank conversations to have. And factoring in all those closing costs that Rashidah mentioned is also one of the ways that you can reach your bottom line.
And then just to kind of touch about timelines as well, and just thinking about how it works out with the contract of sale. When you're selling a property, your contract is going to have a specific time frame on when you have to close. For basically a house or a condo, your closing is roughly about 60 days. For a co-op, it's 90 days. So when you're starting to think about putting the property on the market, and are you really going to be able to close and leave your property in 60 days or 90 days? So that's definitely something as far as timelines. So those are typically the timeframes you're looking at when you're selling your property. 60 days for a standard house and a condo, 90 days roughly for a co-op, can be a little bit longer, but those are kind of your standard ones.
Okay, great. So once we know what your exit strategy is, and everything is adding up for you, and you've decided to sell, these will be the next steps that you would take. So once we know what your property type is, you really want to assemble your team. So you would like you need to find a real estate attorney. Obviously, Rashidah is the one that we really love working with, but you can talk to friends, colleagues, people who've been through this process before. Anybody who's had good experience with a real estate attorney in New York City who knows the property type that you are working in. It's absolutely essential that you have a New York City real estate attorney. It's weird here. Rashidah, I'll let you speak about that. But,
I was going to say, definitely make sure an attorney licensed in New York, that they're familiar, they know real estate, whether it's co-op, condos, or house. One of the things is that attorney is going to be holding the down payment in an escrow account, which is a significant amount of money. And you don't want to have an attorney that doesn't have the correct escrow account or is not in real estate holding that amount of funds that are yours. Until the closing is expires, but at the closing now it gets turned over to you. And then there's documents that have to be prepared. Your deed, your transfer tax documents, working with the co-op transfer agent, working with the condo association to make sure that you have the documents prepared for closing. And the worst thing you can do is to have an attorney as a seller and your documents aren't ready for your closing, and now it's delayed even further and you're ready to leave.
Right. And if you're selling a whole house, you may need a recent survey. You definitely need somebody who's going to review the record for your building to make sure you don't have any open violations. There can be issues with your building that you may actually not know about. And so you really want to talk to an attorney ahead of time. You don't want to wait until you have an accepted offer on your home to find out that you have an open violation. So interviewing somebody while you have the leisure to do so is really key. And the same goes for your real estate brokers. So you're going to be interviewing multiple brokers to see who's going to be the right fit for you and the right fit for your property. So we have, and I think we'll include it in the resources that we sent to you. Yeah, there it is. What to ask a real estate agent. So obviously we have our own way of doing business, and we find that it's really effective and serves our clients incredibly well. For example, Realty Collective is an entirely independent real estate company. So we do not have shareholders. We're not part of a big conglomerate. We work for our clients and our clients alone. We don't work for shareholders. So our fiduciary duty is entirely to you as a seller, and you are the person who we are working for. That's not true about some of the bigger companies, but we also are part of the Real Estate Board of New York, REBNY for short, which means that we're all part of the same MLS. So we adhere to the same code of conduct. We share our listings with people from the bigger brokerages like Compass and Corcoran, whose names may be a little bit better known than ours. At the end of the day, we're not selling Realty Collective, we're selling your home. So our marketing budget goes into marketing your property and not marketing our name. So that's a difference between the way we work and the way some other places work, but you might want a big name company to support you. So interview people from big companies, smaller companies, and the list of questions is in that link right there. One of the things that we also really want to make sure for our clients is that our way of communicating is your way of communicating. So we will, if you prefer to be contacted by text, if you want everything in email, if you'd like your documents to be stored in the cloud, if you'd like everything to be done over the phone, we're very adaptable in terms of how we work with you. Generally speaking, you always want your team to make you feel like a supported client and not like a problem to be solved. So make sure that whoever it is that you are working with is communicating with you in a way that you feel is transparent, is trustworthy, and makes you feel safe every step of the way. I mean, as safe as you can. You're never going to be safe from the IRS. But speak to friends or people who've sold things that are in your neighborhood, comparable properties. It's always good to get a lot of different perspectives, and your choice can be pretty idiosyncratic. Like, you go with who you feel comfortable with. That's what we always say. And then be really clear with people about what the marketing plan is for your home. You want somebody who is going to be who's going to be clear and communicate with you about what they're going to be doing and what they won't be doing. So we always recommend people who are an expert in your neighborhood. So somebody who really understands the market in your neighborhood, but there may be other considerations that are more important to you. You definitely want somebody who understands how to navigate COVID challenges and keeps your home physically safe. Right now we're in kind of a bright spot, I think, as far as that is concerned. But at times when we have to be very careful about showings, you definitely want an agent who understands those COVID protocols. And I think really importantly, you want somebody who loves your home, like loves the property that you're selling and really gets it. You don't want somebody who comes in and sort of like negs your home. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want somebody who comes in and can really communicate their own enthusiasm for the home to every buyer who shows up there. I think that's oh wait, I'm reading this part. So your neighborhood. Oh, so one thing that we also are really clear about at Realty Collective, other people's opinions differ, is that we do not do virtual staging. I find everybody looks at the home on the internet, so photos really matter. And you really need to have a clear photograph of what the home actually looks like, because you don't want to confuse buyers. And it isn't that great to have 100 people to show up to something if 99% of those people are disappointed when they walk in the door. That's not a great feeling for anybody, and it wastes your time as much as it wastes their time. So we will work with our buyers to get the home staged so that it looks in its best possible light for buyers, but it actually looks like the home. So virtual staging, if you don't know what that is that people will take a picture of an empty room or a room that's filled with furniture and swap out the furniture for digital images of different furniture. Well, when a buyer walks in and they don't see the image that they fell in love with on the internet, it is very confusing and a big turnoff for them. So we don't do that kind of work. As a smaller company, we often roll staging into our costs. So our staging does not cost our buyers anything, our sellers anything up front. We will do the staging for you. And if there's any costs associated with that, we can wait until closing. So some places will charge you up front for the staging, but you do have options as far as that goes. I do really recommend, whoever you go with, is that investing in staging really does pay off. Today's buyers tend to, they spend a lot of time online. They really look at those images, and the more those images line up with the aspirations they have for their own lives, the more enthusiastic they're going to be about the home. So sometimes it costs a little bit more up front. You have to do a little bit of investment in the home to bring it into alignment with the market, but doing that will almost always pay off financially. Sometimes it's not worth it because you just don't want to do it, but it's almost always a smart financial bet. All right, soliciting buyers. So this is where we do things a little bit differently from other places. We start with the buyer. So we always say, who is the buyer for this home? I come from a film and theater background, and so I always call it's a little bit like casting. So what's the story that we're telling with this house, and who's the buyer who we're kind of baiting the hook for? So there's going to be lots of buyers all over the place, but generally speaking, chances are that the buyer for your property is who you were when you bought the property plus a lot more money. Like that, like you want a sort of really wealthy version of who you were when you bought it. So all the things that you fell in love with, or all of the reasons you chose to buy that home, are probably going to be the same reasons that your buyers are willing to make an offer on it now. So we try to steer into that, and then we market to those people. I mean, obviously we're marketing quite broadly, but we want to know who that buyer is when they walk through the door. And you want a broker who can really tell that story. So when I'm selling a house right now that was renovated about 18 years ago, and it doesn't have the most fashionable finishes, but it's a really solid house, and they did a really great job when they renovated it in 2005. And that's the story that I'm telling. I'm not telling the story. I'm not trying to pretend that it was just renovated yesterday. And I'm able to tell that story like it's the strength of the home. So look at these decisions that they made 18 years ago and how well they have held up. So they made these really smart investments at that time, and now you, the buyer, get to benefit from them now, which is very different from it has, stainless steel appliances and top of the line everything, because it doesn't. It's just a really great solid house. And because that's the story that we're telling, that's the story that people are responding to. So I don't have people walking in the door and seeing that there's a white gas range and being shocked that it doesn't look like a brand new construction condominium. We have people who come in, they're charmed by that instead. And a lot of that is really, that's the marketing. That's the thing you pay us for, really, is our ability to tell that story to a wide audience, and then in a incredibly efficient and organized way, get those people and all of their agents through in the very first weekend of showing, which is what I've been doing this week, is booking everybody for that. So, and in this case, for this home, and I'm sort of dwelling on this home, that we decided not to do a staging, but instead to let the owner keep her possessions in the home. And so then we just really kind of polished it up and made it look great and organized the shelves. But her own possessions are really beautiful, and her spirit is in that house. And people come in and they feel that spirit. And it's a really warm and welcoming home that doesn't look like a West Elm ad. And that is, you do not need to look like a furniture magazine to sell your home. Just need to make sure you're telling the right story around it. Okay, gosh, that went on a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. I mean, even as I've done this with you guys before, and just hearing about the staging, I think that's such an important aspect of it as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's very theatrical, right? Because this is a really emotional process that people go through. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to think that this is a big financial decision that they're making. They cannot help themselves. If they fall in love with your house, they will do everything in their power, sometimes to their own financial detriment, to make it their own. And since we represent you, we encourage them to do that, in part because we know they'll be happy in the home. So even if they have to overspend a little bit, we're happy to transfer their wealth to you in exchange for them getting to live in your beautiful home. So considering offers, as we mentioned, definitely talk to your attorney ahead of time. So that before you consider any offers, you want to know if there are any issues that that are going to come up during the due diligence process. So if you know already that there's I'll let Rashidah actually.
I was going to say, one of the things that I'm also kind of like pre-plan, and I would say it's always great, you want to start getting your stuff together as you start thinking about putting your property on the market. Have you done renovations? Have you done any alterations? Have you, did you get a notice from the city about a sidewalk lead, or a notice from the city about something, a garage issue? Where is your deed? Where is your documents for when you purchased the property? Start getting together all of those paperwork, and your attorney can look up some of these information. So your deed, your attorney can look up. Your attorney can look up to see if there's any violations on your property. So all of that preliminary you want to start putting together. So once you get that offer, you can, your buyer is ready, you're ready to go ahead and sell. Also, have you refinanced your loan? loans on the property. That comes up a lot. Old mortgages that are still on the property that you thought you paid off. And yes, you did, but the bank never followed through and did what they had to do. So it's always important that kind of leading up to pre-contract, pre-getting your buyer, just getting yourself, your paperwork together. And also helps you with, when you're putting it on the market do you have your latest maintenance statements? Do you have is there assessments? The financials for the building. So you want to start getting all of that kind of paperwork together.
For sure. If you're in a condo building that had a tax abatement and the tax abatement is phasing out, there's always going to be questions about that. If you have any issues with your house that you know are going to come up in an inspection. So if you have a hot water heater that is at the end of its life, or if you know that there are issues with your roof, those are things that I think you can be frank with your real estate agent about and your attorney, so we can assess how many of those things we do have to disclose to the buyers. You don't want to be surprised during an inspection by anything that you could have known about beforehand. So those are all we are here to help manage the buyer's expectations. So if, for example, we know that there's an issue, one of the things that happens in Brooklyn all the time is you have an old house that doesn't have a certificate of occupancy because it was built in like 1875 and it never had a certificate of occupancy because it wasn't required at the time of the building. Well, there are lenders who are used to doing deals in New York and that is not a big deal to them. And then there are lenders, particularly some of the new ones that people are getting their pre-approvals with, who will freak out that there's a building that doesn't have a certificate of occupancy and will not lend on that property as a result. So for us, understanding what the potential issues are and making sure that the offers that you're considering, that the ones that are going to pass all of those tests kind of rise to the top. And if we anticipate that there are going to be any issues, that we address them from the beginning so that by the time you're signing a contract, everybody is in alignment and everybody knows what to expect for the rest of the process. So let's say one of the things, it is a seller's market. So we've done all of the prep, we've staged it, we've marketed it, we have our first open house where we're flooded with people, and then you start to get offers coming in. So as you're considering offers, you've done your homework with Rashidah, you understand what the potential limitations of the home are. And so now you're ready to assess what the different offers mean to you. So one thing that we say is do take the first offer seriously. So if you don't get multiple offers initially, sometimes that first offer comes in and they offer your full asking price. And then sometimes the sellers can feel like, oh no, I priced it too low because I'm getting what I should have priced it higher. But oftentimes the first people to make that offer are people who have been beat out on bidding wars in the past. They are really the most prepared buyers. They know this market, they understand the value of your home, and they're ready to meet you at your asking price. So take those folks seriously. Sometimes it feels like it means you underpriced it. It really doesn't. And then even if you get an offer that is below your asking price, sometimes even an offer that feels a little bit insulting, we always encourage you to counter that offer. Sometimes there's a buyer and just the way they want to do it is they want to make sure they're not overpaying. And so they'll offer some incredibly low, insultingly low number for your home, just because for their own process, they want to know that they paid as little as they possibly could. Maybe as little as they possibly could is still over the asking price, but just as you don't want to accept a low offer, they don't want to offer more than they're going to be required to pay. So trust the market to actually get you to a higher number, and try not to be insulted or take it personally if somebody offers you something low. We always encourage you to counter it. But COVID concerns into a contract is less of an issue for us right now in the process, but do keep in mind one of the things that had happened was there were some issues with people being able to close in a timely manner during the sort of peak of COVID. And this is something that could come back up again. Obviously, there are new variants all the time. But if there's something where the city goes into lockdown again, that may delay your closing, or it may delay certain of those. It may delay the inspection. Those are things that you just want to make sure that your attorney is putting into your contract.
Yeah. And I would say now, I mean, we're 2 years and some, we've, a lot of the contracts actually have kind of like evolved through this. So you'll see as a seller, I mean, now we call it COVID concerns. It's actually probably going to go past. I think some things are going to stay in the contract. Like we've now incorporated remote closings, electronic signatures, certain documents as a seller makes it easier for you actually. Closing with power of attorney, so you don't have to attend the closing. Time periods, we always put it, we have those provisions. I said the time frames, the 60 or the 90 days to close, but then also understand that if it is delayed, it's told, but then there is an outside date that both parties has an option. So there's things that we still can incorporate it, even though we're seem to go past, hopefully, the the major hurdles. That we can incorporate as into the contract still. And I know it says COVID concerns, but actually these are just going to be now kind of like additional provisions in the contract to hopefully make it much smoother.
Yeah, I think it's a real upside to what COVID has forced a degree of modernization on our industry that had never seemed possible before. And in the days of closings that had just like white out and handwritten signatures. So I think it's actually a boon for you. And then let's talk a little just more about how the documents that you need for your contract and your closing.
So yeah, definitely you're going to need, well, not definitely, but it helps it a lot if you have these documents. Your current deed. Now, if you don't have it, your attorney can look it up on this system in New York called ACRIS. If you own a house or a condo, you have a deed. If you have a co-op, you have a stock certificate and a lease. This is actually probably one of the most important things for a co-op, because those original documents, if you have lost it, or if you had it at some point and you have lost it, then it's extremely important that your attorney knows this in the beginning. I've actually started having my clients, when I meet with them in the beginning, give it to me, because I trust them, but I don't. I want to see it physically if they say I have it and it's an original, because you can go into contract, you can be ready to close, and then turns out you don't have your original and your whole deal is blown up or is delayed for months trying to figure out what has to happen and get affidavits. So not so much important for a house or a condo regarding the deed, because it's been recorded. You can pull that up on the city's information. But if you have a co-op, it's very, very important regarding that stock and lease that you have the original. Or if you don't and you have a mortgage, that you know that your bank has that original, so that we can get that in time for the closing, because that can take 4 weeks to 8 weeks, depending on some banks. Violations, you probably don't have that much information unless you're one of these clients that really stay on top of their property. But if you've had it for years and you got a notice from the city regarding a trash on the sidewalk, or there was some construction work, these type of things come up. If you had tenants, or and typically these violations are more for houses than for a condo or a co-op, that you may see violations, but you always want to be ahead of that to see if there are any violations. The main thing that comes up a lot with houses, if you did some renovations, you hired that contractor to do this work, and the contractor said, hey, I pulled all the permits, I got the electrical work, I updated your plumbing, I did pull all of the permits, I added this interior work, but they never closed out those permits. And now you're looking to sell, and that contractor got paid years ago, but they never did that final step of closing out permits. So if you did any type of renovations, whether it's a co-op, a condo, or a house, you always want to double check, look up the property, get in contact with those contractors, make sure that they did what they were supposed to do, and close out every single one of those paperwork. Always important, when you originally purchased the property, you probably got a packet from your attorney, and that has certain documents like your survey if you had a house, an owner's policy, which is insurance that you got for the house or the condo when you purchased it. So that's also important, because it helps if there's an issue that comes up, it can solve it within 15 minutes versus solving it with a month or two of delays if you have some of those documents already from when you purchased it. So definitely some of the paperwork you want to get together. And just also thinking for like a condo or a co-op, not so much for the house itself, but you're going to need your offering plan, your financials for the last 2 years. So it's always those type of things. A lot of them are now done electronically, but if you purchase this, 10, I would say even like 5 years ago, you probably still have this big booklet that's like 100 pages, and it's not in electronic form, and you're going to have to give that to your realtor or to your attorney because you're going to have to now turn that over to your buyer. So it's always important to look up to make sure that you have those original documents from when you purchased the property, versus it's maybe chunked. I have clients that literally, when I represented them, they still have the Post-it notes on this big booklet, and they hand it over to me with the same Post-it notes. And I'm like, you literally just put it in a corner and had it for me now that you're selling. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's all you needed to do.
All you need to do.
Yes.
Okay, and then as we get into contract, we talked about the COVID-19 considerations, but this is after you've accepted an offer, you've done a lot of, they've done your initial due diligence, and now there's another attorney involved who is going back and forth with Rashidah.
Yeah. So we're thinking about the seller, you're selling, but now that you're in contract, the buyer has to do a whole bunch of stuff, and their attorney is involved as well. And there's a co-op attorney involved, and they have to do kind of like their own title searches on the premises and things like that to make sure that you have the right to sell them the property. And that's why I say it's very important that you have those documentations, because as a seller's attorney, I can turn that over to them and say, hey, we have the survey, we have the deed, we have the old satisfactions, we have all of the paperwork from when they purchased it, so that there's no issues, there's no title issues, or there's no issues with the co-op that are taking consideration, because the buyer side has to do a whole bunch of with their mortgage, underwriting, reviewing all of these items as well. And I know we mentioned closing the deal. Yeah. I think that there's a couple of steps in there, but closings, timeframes. Main thing is your timeframes for closing. 60, I can't reiterate this enough. 60 on or about 60 days for New York. New York, there's a 30-day grace period. So as a seller, the property has to most times be delivered vacant and broom clean in time for the closing. So you have to take that into consideration. What are your intentions after the closing? Are you going to be able to leave the property without getting your funds and understand you'll get your funds after the closing? So whether are you buying something else? Are you renting something else? Are you moving out of state? Those are things when you're thinking about the closing, because it has to be delivered vacant. Keys have to be turned over. The buyer has to do their final walkthrough prior to closing. So you have to be out of the property. And there's situations where you can negotiate what we call post-possession. If you're buying and selling, I have a client that is buying and selling right now, and that's a contingency that we had to put into the contract, because as a seller, you also, all of your money is tied up into that property, and you have to find out what are my plans after. Do I need those funds to buy my next property? Do I need those funds to, rent something out? I need the rental, for giving them a good security deposit and show income and stuff like that, that you have to think about when closing. Power of attorneys for closings. As a seller, your part is probably 15, 20 minutes at a closing. So a lot of sellers, they give their attorneys power of attorneys to sign the documents. With COVID, kind of these things that I think are going to probably go past it is that we meet with our clients in advance, have you pre-signed the documents, so you don't necessarily have to attend the closing in person. And then we get the keys, or the realtors get the keys. So you just really have to wait for the funds to be deposited into your account, whether it's a wire, whether it's a check. But it makes it a lot easier where you have your attorney kind of spearhead all of that. So you don't have to worry about scheduling. If you're at work, you don't necessarily have to attend the closing and delay it even further.
Right. We talked about vacating. So we could do, again, like another whole entire hour on buying and selling at the same time. So if it is something where you need to continue living in the property afterwards, or if you have a tenant in the property who has a lease that's going to extend beyond the date of the closing, those are all things that can be negotiated in advance. It's, you know, it's not ideal, but as long as everybody knows going into it that the property is not going to be delivered vacant, then you can make sure you select an offer that aligns with what you're going to be able to deliver.
Mhm.
So right before the closing, so usually within 24 hours of the closing, we do a final walkthrough. So after the home is vacant and broom swept, we come back through with the buyers and they check to make sure that all of the mechanicals are working and that the property is being delivered in the same condition that is agreed to at the time of the contract signing. So if there were any provisions like, oh, you know, there was this outlet wasn't working, you fixed that outlet before the closing. But occasionally there will be something that we don't know about until that walkthrough. And sometimes that can be addressed with a credit to the buyers at the closing. So you can say, oh, you know what, the plumber didn't get there in time to clear that drain. We'll give you a $200 credit at closing. And that's something that we as real estate agents will discuss and then negotiate with the attorneys. But I think that's about it. It's a lot to go through, I know. And so you may have questions. We have about 6 minutes left. If anybody wants to add any questions to the chat, or if you want to give us some questions later on, we will also be happy to follow up. I know it's like, this is like a big, fast overview of what the process is. And every property is different, so you're going to have your own experience doing it. Just know that the team that you assemble should understand what your specific circumstances are and have a plan to address your needs.
I think a good takeaway is always preparation as a seller. Get your stuff, your documents and everything in order so that it makes it as seamless as possible, because you just want to collect that check or get that deposit into your account at the closing. So the more of the documentation you have from when you bought the property or throughout the process of when you have owned the property and you have that handy, this is the time as you're thinking about selling to start kind of going through your documentation and putting everything aside.
For sure. As with so many things in life, preparation is key. Okay, great. Well, if nobody has any questions, I think we can just wrap it up here. I think the Rashidah's takeaway is a really good one. Preparation is key. And the other, I think, really crucial piece is give yourself time to interview people to bring onto your team. You do not want anybody who's going to make this process more stressful. You want people who are going to alleviate your stress as you go through it. So so give yourself time to really interview people the way you would like a doctor. Somebody's going to be a big part of your life for the next few months. And you don't want them to be somebody you decide partway through you don't like anymore. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And Rashidah, always great to see you.
You too as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.